In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Battersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front-end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution. Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Higher Ed Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 274 with Scott Marshall, President and CEO at Semester at Sea. So really interesting to kind of hear his story, his journey with the Institute for Shipboard Education, ISE, the nonprofit that directs the Semester at Sea program, which is, if you don't know, kind of really unique study abroad offering that students, in college at any institution can jump on board with and get credit for, experiential global education offering. So Scott shares his story, his journey into podcasting, which is really cool, and just reflections on, why the work that they're doing is kind of so important and especially important right now for students and kind of with what they need and what they're demanding. So appreciate Scott jumping on, sharing all that you did for this episode. And thank you so much for listening to this episode number 274 with Scott Marshall. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Semester at Sea is something that I have known of for a long time. So I'm excited to learn more about that, more about your story. And also, I know we're fellow podcasters, so I'm sure we'll get to all of that in due time. But I'm curious because Semester at Sea is such a unique thing. What brought you to work there? You were in a position before becoming president even. So I'm curious just sort of what was the story that brought you to Semester at Sea and then kind of into your current role?
Yeah, the short story is I was in higher ed within a business school as a faculty member for a long time, took on administrative roles within higher ed, was very fortunate to take a sabbatical while I was a vice provost, went on Semester at Sea as a faculty member, was on there with my wife and our two sons in spring of 17. During that time, I learned about a vice president position at this small and mighty nonprofit that runs the Semester at Sea program. Of course, my wife had to agree that I would take such a jump. I applied and was fortunate enough to get that position, joined this organization in October of 17, have never looked back, have loved every day as hard as some of the days have been. And in January of 2020, we can talk about that date when you want, but January 2020, I became president and CEO of this nonprofit. And that's a whole story in it itself. But, long history in higher ed, and long commitment to study abroad. And now I'm with this nonprofit that runs the program.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, coming in through the faculty perspective, because I think, there's what I understand of it, and I'll allow you to explain a little bit more, but like it is kind of like a campus on a boat. Like, like there's a lot of different roles that go into sort of like, the trips and everything. It's not just like solely academic and everything, but that was sort of like your route in. So I guess, yeah, as you have been there for the past several years, just getting more kind of the exposure of kind of all the nitty gritty that makes these trips happen, makes them effective and impactful for the students. Can you briefly explain a little bit more about like how the trips work and like how do students get involved with them?
Yeah, so it is a semester at sea. So half the time, college students are on the ship, and about half the time they're in different countries. They are taking 12 to 15 credit hours. Those credit hours are earned through Colorado State University, which is our academic partner. They come from 150 to 180 different universities each voyage. That voyage is a semester long, basically 105 days. They get on the ship, already registered for their courses, already haven't paid their tuition and board, go through orientation, and they begin their courses. And within 5 to 7 days, they're at their first port. They will go into that port either with their faculty member for a day because it's part of their course. They'll take a field program, which we offer, or they'll go and design with their own new best friends their own experiences. And they'll go into that country, experience it, understand it, and then get back on the ship, get back into their community, back in their classes. And we go to 8 to 10 countries every voyage. So this is what we, in simple terms, call a comparative, experiential, international learning experience.
I want to use that to tee up what you're saying of like, coming in as president in January of 2020, which, we're recording this in March of 2025. We're celebrating 5 years since the declaration of the global pandemic. So I think it's got a lot of people kind of reflective, but it feels like a more robust study abroad trip. But like, a lot of the similar sort of structure of like, you're doing it for credit, with faculty members and, you kind of get oriented to the whole experience and all that kind of stuff. And I think obviously, yeah, it's kind of taking it to a different degree in the sense of, you're on the boat, you're kind of taking the slow road, slow approach and not just like flying to one place and that sort of thing. So like it's a similar structure that a lot of people would probably be familiar with. But I think to me, it feels like sort of fleshing it out or sort of filling in more of it versus it feeling like, I guess for lack of a better term, like it feels like sort of just like transactional or something. The idea of like, well, we're going to get you there as quick as possible. Just like be there, do all the things and then just like get back. Like it is kind of intentionally slower in that way. But with all of that being said of what these trips typically look like, yes, you come in January 2020 as president. What was the experience like of having to, and again, I'm sure this could be the whole episode is reflecting on this experience, but I guess just briefly, like, what did it sort of show you about sort of like the organization and everything else, I guess, of like when you came in, having to so quickly and dramatically pivot just months after becoming president?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Dustin. And we could do a whole episode on this as well. January 2nd, of 2020, I stand in front of the board as new president CEO, give a presentation about what we want to achieve in the next 5 years, real stretch goals, having ambitions for the program and for the organization. 2.5 months later, we're shutting down the program, sending everybody home from Cape Town, South Africa. As context, the program is run by the Institute for Shipboard Education, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. 90% of our revenue is tuition, room, and board. 73% of our fixed cost is the ship. That simple logic makes it really hard if we're not earning revenue. And we have to cancel the next 3 voyages. So we go over a year and a half with no revenue. So yeah, in terms of someone in my position and trying to figure out how this 60-year-old program survives was a true test for myself, for the board, for our leadership team. Within 6 months of becoming president, I have to do layoffs and furloughs and cuts to employee contributions to retirement. And it was a very difficult time. And we have to figure out who we are. There's a lot of self-reflection on how we're going to show up for everybody in that environment. So again, we can go through just a leadership podcast at some point to talk about what it means to show up every day to fight the battle to get an organization that has such a legacy, over 70,000 alums, through its most trying time.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'll use that as sort of a segue of like, yeah, I mean, that being such this like, unexpected crash course on leadership and making hard decisions, and obviously understanding the value of what ISE and Semester at Sea does. So it's like, well, we need to be able to survive. How do we kind of, maybe just kind of go into hibernation for a little bit and kind of get to that point to where we can start doing trips again and everything. So you recently got into podcasting, I think within like the last year or so, which I love. Always great to have a fellow podcaster on. And the show As Unexpected. But if you just want to briefly talk about your experience getting into podcasting as we sort of like segue from, the past of, Semester at Sea, going through that kind of trying experience, it obviously taught you some things. And now as we're starting to look more towards the future, I feel like, the curation of these leadership stories, I'm sure, is that idea of like, how do we find motivation and inspiration to move forward?
Yeah. So no question that the pandemic and the impact on our program and organization led me to begin this thinking more concretely. But at the core, what happened is I needed to develop my own personal leadership model. I had to do a lot of self-exploration and define that very clearly. I've been in quote unquote leadership positions before, and I'd taken leadership development courses and so forth, but I'd never had to truly focus on what is my model. And so through my own reading and reflection, I developed my model. And then after a while, once we were back underway and our program was running, and I thought a lot of our Semester at Sea alumni have gone through voyages where there's diversions and changes. And we always talk about Semester at Sea's F word is flexibility. You got to be willing to go with the flow a bit. And over time, I just said, well, it's about showing up when things don't go as expected or as unexpected. And I think the true testament of leadership is how we show up when things don't go as planned. The second thing I would say to that is leadership is not positional. That is, everybody has the capacity to be to live into their leadership. So I press upon all of our staff that, hey, you're all in your leadership capacity here. It's about how we exercise it and how we live into it day to day. So that's the premise. And then I really wanted to lift up our alums. We've got just these amazing alums out there. And from, a vice president at Warner Brothers who oversees unscripted and animated, and another one who does these phenomenal, moving, emotionally terrifying, not terrifying, but emotionally draining, powerful documentaries. And, I'm going to do a recording later today about someone who's been an actor all her life. And so I wanted to feature them. And so this was bring these things together about talking about leadership as how we show up when things go as unexpected, and really lifting up our alumni who have amazing life stories about how they've lived into this capacity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to, curate, like you said, because like every Semester at Sea trip probably having some flexibility that was needed. And that's such a kind of core principle for good leadership is, being responsive and adaptable and those sort of things. So like, that you could maybe like follow that thread through someone's like long career and everything. Cause like, I think it is even the idea of like, you need to maybe like put kind of bounds and give yourself a sandbox to play in, because it could be like, I want to do a podcast about leadership lessons and like hearing people's journeys. And it's like, I mean, that's basically like anybody on planet Earth. You could kind of like find some sort of, semblance of something that's like kind of related to that. So like with, now kind of bringing it more to the present, again, we're recording this March 2025, higher ed has really pushed through, I think, post-pandemic, a lot of, scrutiny, a lot of kind of skepticism around relevance and everything. And I just think, kind of changing student demands that I think are really, really trying to kind of, we saw that institutions could make dramatic changes through kind of sheer force of will and the right support and everything else, the right pressures, kind of put some heat on their necks and everything. So to me, it is like where a lot of folks are trying to kind of keep that momentum going, not kind of have a backslide in terms of like retracting some of the changes that higher ed has experienced over the past few years. So with all that being said, context kind of laid here, what to you makes experiences like Semester at Sea more important now than ever?
Well, there's a number of ways to answer that question. I'll start with the importance of truly getting outside of our own small world and understanding the small world. That is that there is only one planet. I don't have great faith in living on Mars anytime soon. There is this phenomenal humanity that exists here, and it's only by understanding that humanity can we really preserve what's most important for us. And Semester C is one way to get a sense of that. There's a lot of ways to do it. I believe in our model. I think our model accomplishes what many opportunities can't, but I believe in any opportunity to get outside of the small world that we oftentimes grow up in and understanding the planet Earth and the humanity that exists on it. So that's just one deep mission part of it, right? The second part of it, and you and I talked about this a little bit before, I really think experience outside of the classroom is essential. However, whatever form that takes, as part of your learning. Dustin, I grew up in higher ed where I started in a classroom that was tiered, and actually in my PhD program, we were using chalkboards. That's how old I am. And we graduated to projectors of PowerPoint, and I was just never fulfilled in that environment. So I had to bring guest speakers in, and I had to find ways to get my students out of the classroom. And we have to find a way that learning is embedded with experience. Experience is embedded in learning. And Semester C, again, is one model for that, where students, yes, they get back on the ship, they go into their classrooms with their faculty members, they're studying abnormal psych or political science courses or oceanography, but then they're going out and they're experiencing it. And that is profoundly more impactful and lasting than sitting in a tiered classroom and hearing a lecture and having some conversation. So you and I talked about the book by Kathleen Delaski, Who Needs College Anymore? And Imagining a Future When Degrees Don't Matter. That's provocative. Degrees do matter, and they will always matter. They're a point of completion. But really at the core is this idea that we have to embed experience in the learning.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And also, as of the recording to this, I have an interview with Kathleen that I'll be conducting in a few weeks. So I guess just with space and time, to me now, I think as you're hearing this, the interview will have actually happened, but it hasn't happened for me yet. I'm looking forward to it. And I think, because, it's definitely a provocative title. It's getting a lot of great, sort of think pieces out there, people sort of interfacing with it. And I'm excited to speak with her and kind of uplift, her perspective to our audience as well. But I think it's definitely the right take of like, we don't need to sort of blow up higher education and, whatever else. It's like, how do we, elevate, evolve? And, a big way to do that is the experiential learning piece. And to me, I guess it's even that idea that obviously there's so many different institutions out there, different shapes and forms and sizes and, public, private, everything else. The idea that you all exist where it's just like, we're here, like, as long as there's space, like, we will welcome students in who qualify and, apply and everything else. Like, so the idea of like you as an institution, if it's like, do your thing, be who you are, find your differentiators, like, don't feel as though you need to be all things to all people, like build your own whole infrastructure to facilitate study abroad trips for, all your students and everything, like leverage, encourage your students to seek out opportunities that exist out there that they, can kind of just, plug into and do a semester, come back, and it's like, you got credit for it. And, we'll transfer those in and everything. So I'm curious, like, if there's maybe any of those sort of pieces of your approach, like the, just the nature of kind of the day-to-day of the trips, where you go, anything else, I guess, of like, certainly maybe you had, the year and a half with no trips to kind of incubate and think through some, maybe different approaches, different ideas. Like, how have you like adapted your approach at all over the past few years?
Yeah. So in terms of designing the itineraries for the voyages, our first screen is health and safety. Just got to put that out there. Like, we use the travel advisors from the Department of State. We ensure that there's health, medical infrastructure within a country. We make sure, of course, that there's no civil strife. Like, we have to, that's our first screen no matter what. And then we want to get our students to 8 to 10 countries, and we have to do that in 105 days. So we have some built-in constraints to what we can do. On the other hand, we can continue to provide our students with this really rich comparative experience in a whole number of ways. Before the Suez closed, because of the conflict in the area, we were going to Jordan and Dubai and then Mumbai. I mean, that right there, just embedded in the middle of a voyage, is phenomenal contrast and comparison, right? Now we're taking our voyagers around South Africa. They get to go into India, and in the future, we think we'll take them into Sri Lanka, all the way up to Hong Kong. Again, phenomenal comparative experiences. But to your extended question, what else are we doing? So really living into our mission, we recently introduced, in fact, last fall was our first cohort of students, a program focused on constructive dialogue facilitation. Living into our mission, enhancing their own sort of resume, employability, skill set. Students in a small cohort of 20 get trained pre-voyage and during the voyage on constructive dialogue facilitation. Incredibly valuable skill set. Again, living into our mission, bringing down divides, enabling greater conversation. So this is an add-on. This wraps around the 12 credits. Next fall, it's very likely that we will be offering an artificial intelligence certificate as a wraparound, adding again this very practical, very engaging learning experience that lives into our mission. How do we equip students with the skill set and the understanding, but also to use that skill set and that knowledge to solve major issues in the world, to be part of the solution, to be agents of positive change. So those are the kind of things that I think all organizations involved in the higher ed experience need to be exploring, and they need to be doing it quickly. And that's another thing we can talk about is the pace of change, the pace of innovation. And fortunately, as a nonprofit, we can probably innovate a bit faster than many institutions can. But we partner with them, right? How do we partner with them to do this work? How can we be a complement to their efforts?
Want to know what AI-powered, people-focused really looks like? The 2025 Engage Summit will show you how AI transforms engagement without losing the human touch. Join us June 24th through 25th in Charlotte for actionable insights, hands-on demos, and transformative strategies. Enrollify listeners save $50 with code Enrollify50. Sign up now at engage.element451.com. Yeah, that's great stuff. And I love that, you're seeking to make the most of sort of like the gaps between the credits and everything. Like it might be like harder to make like huge seismic shifts with like sort of the explicit curriculum, but like certainly it's like just like at any institutions, like students aren't in classes all the time. Like how do we make the most of the time when they're just sort of just socializing with one another or, whatever else? Like it could be some just great sort of supplementary curriculum or just obviously like the kind of just co-curricular approach of having sort of intentionality around any of the other sort of like, programming that's happening outside the classrooms or just the way that, staff sort of support students and everything, I think is so important. I think, it's even just some of the trend lines that, are coming just, I think from all sides, whether it's just leaders in higher ed, students, like, it's like, yes, I want to get the credits for the courses that I'm taking and everything, but like to be able to get other certificates, credentials, and things along the way. So it's not like the whole idea of like, well, you got 97% of the way through your 4-year degree. It's almost as if you didn't even start. Like you have nothing to explicitly show for it. You do have a transcript that says you complete all these courses and got credits, but like the idea of like the credentials, like is it like this sort of like sign of like completion and just has market value. People understand it. It reflects something. If we're getting to a point where along the journey towards that, people can also get, and pick and choose from options in any number of areas, whether it's, just like skill sets that they have around, working, leading other people, project management, and explicit products or platforms or something. I've seen a lot around like Salesforce, Google, and, AWS or whatever else. So, and then, yeah, like the idea of like having people say like, I have gone through this experience that provides me with a level of AI literacy, like, cause I think it's even the acknowledgement of like, you all could be, and across all sorts of disciplines here, but it is increasingly necessary for people to be fluent in how to interface with these tools and platforms and understand sort of the impacts of them. And so it's really exciting, just to hear that is something that is sort of finding its way into what you all are doing. And I think certainly emblematic of where I think higher ed is and should be going.
And I would add to that what you just said. As you opened up, higher ed has, kind of emerged out of a difficult time. It's reinstated its purpose. And I fundamentally believe in that purpose. I don't think we should dice and slice and try to privatize it all. Like that adulting process that occurs where we're developing rigorous thinking skills happens in the 4 to 6 years that occur in an undergraduate experience, regardless of age. There's a core thing that happens through that curriculum that develops great thinking skills. We don't want to lose that. At the same time, we do need these other practical skill sets wrapped around them or embedded in them, depending. And every university should be exploring how they're doing that and how quickly they're doing it in response to student demand. I'm not concerned about political demands. What are students? How are we serving them the best we can serve them? And I think we have to think very innovatively. I'll go into this AI literacy thing again. So we're going to pilot this on fall. Like we're experimenting with it. We'll see how it goes. Is there a good completion? Is there a good learning? Are they happy with what they've gotten? If it goes well, then how do we start to embed that in our core product? If it doesn't go well, do we need to change it? Do we need to alternate it? Or do we need to delete it? But we need to be able to innovate around the edges and see what's working, embed it if it's working, revise it if it's not working, or get rid of it. Like we got to have that energy.
Yeah, I mean, and you're perfectly setting up kind of my final question here, because I think that is absolutely the mindset that higher ed leaders should be having, is like starting somewhere, doing kind of the prototypes and the pilots, evaluating. And again, like it could be where it's like, oh my gosh, this went horribly, we should just scrap it. Could be like, it didn't go as we thought. But I think if we just revise it, it could get where we want it to be, or it's like incredible, worked perfectly, or it just close to it, and we can, keep it moving forward. We can expand it and that sort of thing. So, because I do think like just, writ large, a lot of the curriculum, the way that the curriculum is delivered, the, modalities of learning, and like, there's just a lot that needs to sort of be, adjusted, adapted, and all that for higher ed right now. And, that I'm always kind of bullish on like, the best of both worlds of like, hybrid programs. Cause it's such, especially like, the idea of like, okay, I'm going to study online. I'll stay at home. I'll save some costs because I'm going to invest in these like super high impact experiential learning opportunities where it's just like, I'm just taking my courses. I'm just like watching some videos, doing some like online video session discussions, whatever else. It's like, I'll do that. I'll just like stay at home with my family and, whatever else. And again, this can apply to like adult learners, like across the board. Like, you're still getting some of those benefits of just like, well, you got to manage your time. You've got to like figure out what, kind of your study flow and all of that. But then that idea of like, the exposure to different cultures and people and all this kind of stuff where it's just like, absolutely. Like that's what I want to get out of this. And to like build my social capital. It's like, how you could do that, like go on this like amazing trip with like, a set group of people and, do all those things. So I think that is like a flavor of what, I mean, from the student experience would be like the best of both worlds, and that they could, do things in a way that is going to be, cost effective, mindful of whatever sort of, competing priorities they have in their life. And then still try to just, enable them to have those really high impact, like study abroad. It's just like, it's one of those things, like it's just hugely impactful to students and, just for a laundry list of reasons and everything. So I'm hopeful that, that institutions can like, if they are expanding their digital education portfolio, try to sort of like piece things together where it's just like, because obviously again, like the trips are comprised of students from all over. It's not where it's just like, oh, we're just trying to get a bunch of our online students to then like go do this other thing that we're like contracting out to do a, study abroad thing or whatever. So I don't know. That's like sort of like in my mind, but I guess I'll just tee you up with all my sort of ideating and, getting all geeked out here. You've already shared some great advice and great insights here for other higher ed leaders to kind of follow. Any other advice that you'd want to give to, to encourage current higher ed leaders out there right now to be kind of elevating their work?
Well, I'm going to get very specific to study abroad. And it's a call out to all of my colleagues who work in study abroad offices. So anybody who's in higher ed leadership, I want to flip the script to the degree possible for everybody to think about study abroad as a revenue generation office rather than a cost center. The reason is there is very clear evidence that students who study abroad are retained better, graduate faster, with more credits, with a higher GPA. Okay. Retained better, graduate faster with more credits and a higher GPA. Now, who doesn't want that in a budget model? So rather than say that that study abroad office is, it's got to generate its own revenue, charge the fees, we're going to invest very lightly. Invest in it. Invest in your students going on study abroad because it will pay off for you as an institution. This is bottom line, common sense. It's not easy, but it's what makes sense. So I would just want to call out to all my colleagues who struggle to get funding for their offices. We got to turn the narrative around and realize the value to the student and the institution with this kind of effort. The last thing I would just say, and this call out to all my colleagues in higher ed as well, again, I lived in it and now I'm adjacent to it. You're doing really important work. No matter what the external chatter might be, you are doing really important work. And I know at times it can be hard. There's a quote from Daniel Pink in his book Drive that goes something like this: the most deeply motivated people, not to mention the most productive and satisfied, hits their desires to causes larger than themselves. It's what I've done for sure. Like, I am deeply motivated, and hopefully those around me to say I'm pretty productive. I know I'm quite satisfied because I've hitched myself to a cause around global connectedness that drives me every day. So again, calling out to you, Dustin, and everybody involved in higher ed, stay committed. It is important work.
Yeah. Great sentiment to end on. And yeah, absolutely agree. I think, because any things like we're going through in this moment, because obviously even just, as we're reflecting 5 years out from the pandemic, like this too shall pass. We have to persist because like the work is so important. The students deserve it. And just trying to always find the ways that we can continue to, elevate and enhance our work and, just creates the great learning experiences for students. So just really appreciate you, all that you shared, all that you do, and for taking time out to chat with me for the podcast here.
Dustin, I appreciate your time.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451. A leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.